Pastor Gail Ferderer leads that group. She steals them from Pastor Tina and then puts them on. And even the real little ones, nobody cried. Nobody fell over. Everybody stayed in their spot. And they actually did what they were supposed to. It was really good. I mean, it was like, wow, impressive. My wife can't even do that. She's not here, that's right. We're good, we're safe. Except for you ladies, the first thing you do is you go out and tell her when you see her. You're not going to believe what your husband said. Shouldn't do that. Last week, what a marvelous story. Look at the story of Zacchaeus. When Jesus comes along and he says to Zacchaeus, I must stay at your house. And that plea was this incredible love. I must stay there, but I can only come if you invite me. We think about Jesus walking through this world, and he came into this world to demonstrate an incredible love and compassion. He came to seek and to save them that are lost. And this morning, what I'd like us to do is look at another, just a little story, that it's not a Christmas story, but it kind of is a Christmas story. Because here we are in the season of crowds everywhere, and if we're not careful, Jesus could get lost. So we're going to be looking at a crowd scene. I'll have you turn with me in your Bibles to Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5, beginning at verse 24. Mark 5, beginning at verse 24. 24 through 34. So Jesus went with him, talking about a man who came to him, a leader of a synagogue, asking for his daughter to be healed. So he agrees. So they go on their way, and they're in the midst of this large crowd. So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, who touched my clothes? You see the people crowding against you, his disciples answered, and yet you can ask, who touched me? But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. Short story. Most of us, if you've been a Christian for any length of time at all, you've read it and you've heard it several times. It's a rather short story. It has a couple unique characteristics to it. We always see it as a story of faith. The basic concept of a woman reaching out in faith to touch the hem of his garment. But really, it's a large crowd scene. It's got some humor. In fact, we all have to chuckle, don't we? People are all crowding around Jesus, and Jesus said, someone touched me. The disciples, you can see the disciples' kind of reaction. You can just imagine. They're like, what do we tell him? He's a pretty smart guy. And he's asking a question like, who touched me? When all he's being jostled about, and who touched me? How bizarre is that? And then we got this woman who in faith dares to reach out and touch his garment. That's the short version of the story. Obviously this morning what I'd like to do is I'd like to take a little closer look. Delve into just a little bit deeper. In fact, let's begin by looking at the main character. The main character in this particular drama is not Jesus. You know, the main character is a woman. In fact, we don't know much about her. In fact, we don't even know her name. It just says, a woman. Verse 25. A woman. A woman. In the story of Zacchaeus, obviously we had his name, but here we don't even have her name. A woman. We know a little bit more about her. She was subject to bleeding for 12 years. Already when you hear that, we have a little bit of empathy, we have a little bit of sympathy. We go, wow, this is kind of a dire situation. She's been sick for 12 years. In fact, we know a little bit more about her because in verse 26, we know that she suffered a great deal. In fact, it's kind of interesting. The Bible points out that it wasn't just a little bit. She suffered a great deal from the hands of many doctors. Now, these doctors did not mean well. She just told me that I forgot to do the missions offering. I love that. Hey, you all should give to missions. You'll do that, won't you? Because I'm not going to give you a chance to today. Oh, there's an opportunity lost. Anyway, let's get back into our story. Thanks, Kim. I won't forget second service. By the way, in the second service, can I just since we've had a little break here, in the second service, we're going to dedicate Scott and Lori Kuha's two little girls. The adoption is official, and some of you know the story, some of you don't. But just a horrific story, and it comes into the culmination of a couple years of them being foster parents and that kind of thing, and then they adopted them, and the adoption is official. So the dedication service is going to be the second service today. And right after the second service, there's going to be cake and a little reception and celebration for them. If you want to go out and get a lunch and come back and have some cake at about 12:15, you are invited to do so. Give them a congratulations, whatever. So that's going to be after the second service. You see what you first service people miss? Every once in a while, you get in on stuff that they don't get. So, okay. It says she suffered a great deal. Now, most of us have not experienced chronic illness, but those of you who have, and you went from one doctor to another, it's not that the doctor does anything wrong, but you just get tired of having to, same thing, and another whole person, and the doctor. It says that she suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors. It also notes that, this is what we know about her, is she was very poor, because she spent all that she had on trying to get better. And the story gets worse as far as her particular picture, our main character here, because instead of getting any better at all, it says she got worse. I mean, you're talking about a prescription for frustration. Every one of us face frustrations in life. Things don't go our way. Bad news comes, and we got to work through a process. And I mean, it can be your personal health, work relationships, marriages. It could be children. Dang children. You do the best, and they make stupid choices, and the consequences of those choices, and it pains you. There's not much you can do, and you just. I was talking to my neighbor the other day, and we were just talking about some child situations and stuff, and he says, doesn't it make you ask you where you go wrong? I said, nope, not for a minute. He looked surprised at me. I said, no, not for a minute. I said, I know that our kids had great parents. I said, it's this thing called free will and choices, and all that goes with that. And again, I remember them just looking shocked, like, I don't think about where we went wrong for a second. They had great parents. Someone say amen? Oh, okay. Golly, man. I mean, holy cow. I was starting to doubt myself there for a minute. I'm telling you that our kids had great parents, and you're just like, well, I don't know. It's, Say that again, sweetheart. One for sure, huh? I can come down off of here. I just want you to know, you guys, Cynthia, I could come over there. You both did.
Oh.
You both did, Crystal. Crystal's like an adopted child. Yeah. I want you to know the adopted children, you can hide, you know. Cynthia is over there. You see her now? That could have ended poorly. You have this woman. You know, when we think about, we read the story and it goes by so fast, and we really get to the end rather quickly without, I think, sometimes really fathoming, truly understanding the nature of her situation. We get to the end where she, in great faith, and it's what an inspiration, she reaches out and she touches Jesus' garment and she gets healed. But you see, everything we just read about in verse 25 and 26, you and I today cannot comprehend the situation she was in. We read a little later, and I'll touch on it again, but after she touches it and Jesus starts looking around, it says she fell at his feet in terror. It says that she was trembling with fear. Why would she do that? You see, our answer lies in Leviticus chapter 15. Leviticus chapter 15, verses 25 through 27. Keep your finger in Mark, because we'll be right back. But in Leviticus chapter 15, verses 25 through 27, it says, when a woman has a discharge of blood for many days, at a time other than her monthly period, or has a discharge that continues beyond her period, she will be unclean as long as she has the discharge, just as in the days of her period. Any bed she lies on while her discharge continues will be unclean, as is her bed during her monthly period. And anything she sits on will be unclean. Anyone who touches them will be unclean. They must wash their clothes and bathe with water, and they will be unclean until evening. All of a sudden now, we get a better picture of what this woman has lived with for 12 years. She's been alone. She's been destitute. She's been looked down upon. She's been rejected. She couldn't go in large crowds. She couldn't be around people. She can't touch anybody. I mean, even at home, can you imagine? And we don't have a clue if she's married or not, but we assume she is. And even at home, she's got to be careful what she touches and where she sits and what she does, and because nobody else can go there. Anything she touches, the bed, the chair, anyone who touches her, or she touches anyone, they become unclean. Now let's get to our setting, the large crowd. You see, because now the setting of the large crowd will make more sense to us. It says that they were pressing around him. In fact, Luke chapter 8 of the same story, in verse 42, says that the crowd almost crushed him. Now we got a picture that you've been around, these crowds where you're just kind of barely inching forward and you're waiting to get in and there's people all around. Jesus in verse 30 says, "Who touched my clothes?" It's kind of interesting. He doesn't say who touched me. He says, "Who touched my clothes?" Who touched my clothes? And the disciples dismay. Again, this is rather comical. They got to look at him like a little bit, whoop. You've been being bumped into, you're hard pressed, you're nearly being crushed for quite some time now, and then out of a sudden now you said, "Who touched me?" In today's society, we'd want to say what? Inappropriately? No, he says, "Who touched my clothes?" The disciple said, man, I'm not sure what you're talking about. But here's what you got to know. Is the minute Jesus said, who touched my clothes? That woman who's not supposed to even be in a crowd, she risked everything to be there. She knows she touched him. And right away, you can imagine the fear that gripped her. God, he's going to find out it's me. And I just caused the prophet, the mighty one, to be unclean. No doubt she tried to slip out of the crowd. I can only imagine that she did. But in verse 32, it says, Jesus kept looking around to see who done it. It doesn't just say that he said, hey, who touched me? But it actually points out that he was not going to give up. It was like he was going to discover who touched his clothes. He's looking, and now you can only imagine the tension, the fear is building in this woman. Verse 33, it says she fell at his feet. No doubt she's been used to being in this subservient, humbled, ostracized position. And now she can only imagine that she's going to be in more trouble than ever before, because here she was, someone who was not supposed to be in a crowd. She's in a crowd touching a lot of people. And then she had the power to reach out and touch the prophet. It says she fell at his feet, trembling with fear. And she told him the whole truth. There's 4 things that I see really interesting about this story. Number 1 is that she had a need. As I'm looking forward to these 4 things, I want to challenge you and I to put ourselves and examine and look at our life. And I'd like to ask you sometimes too, every once in a while people wonder, well, how come we don't see miracles today? How come we don't see this or we don't see that? I think these 4 things are the reason why. We need to understand, like she did. Number 1, she had a need. See, her need was obvious. We read the story, we come across it right away. She had an ailment. She was sick for 12 years. But that need, as we just found out, went a little deeper than just her physical ailment. She was unclean. And in that day and age, spiritually speaking, that state of uncleanness was even more severe than the issue of blood. I mean, that's just a mess, and she's, feels horrible. She can't whatever else. But could you imagine for 12 years having the ailment of being shunned by everyone, being rejected? Nobody wanted to be around you. The loneliness that you would have been in, the shame that you felt, knowing that anyone you touched, you made them dirty. She had a need. Secondly, she was desperate. She was desperate. No one could help. She had went to many doctors, and none of them could help her. I mean, she was desperate. She was poor. That's how desperate she was. She spent everything she had to get better. And she was desperate because, as I said before, she was unclean. She was shunned. She was rejected. She was lonely. She was full of shame. And it's been 12 years. To put it again in today's vernacular, she was ripe for suicide. This was a suicide type situation. If you think about it, for 12 years, being lonely, rejected, no help, no hope, everything was dark. You've been to every doctor. She was desperate. Thirdly, just knowing human nature, she had to feel incredibly unworthy. I think about how many people today, whether it's drug addiction, mental illness, social faux pas, situations going on in your life. It doesn't work out, and you've prayed and you've After a while, you start to doubt yourself. You start to beat yourself up. You start to feel unworthy. And the devil is great to be able to pounce on that situation and say, you're right, it's you. It's your fault. God doesn't love you. You know, if you would have only did this when I told, if you only would have obeyed God when he told you to, but you see, you disobeyed God, and you see, now he's punishing you. The devil is quick to rush in there and give us all kinds of lies to feed into us. And then there's our own self-talk, which is usually negative. There are very few, except for only true narcissistic people, but most of us don't wake up every day saying, you know, I am a wonderful person. I'm going to be a blessing to the lives of many others today. I'm going to serve others because God has given me so much. And I know that I am loved. Most of us just don't get up with that way. Most of us wake up with a little bit of a hangover, the bad feelings of our less than victorious yesterday. And that just keeps piling on and piling on and piling on. And after a while, we pay lip service to the fact that we know that God forgives and all that, but we still walk around with a little bit of a second-class citizen going, you know, if I was just a better person. She had a need. She was desperate. She felt unworthy. But she had this glimmer of hope called faith. I love it. Early in the story, in verse 27, okay, here she is. She's unclean, she's shunned, she's rejected, she's lonely, she's full of shame. Anybody she touches and is around, she makes them unclean, she makes them dirty. In the midst of this desperate, dire situation, it says, when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him. Now, I'd like to just end that sentence like this. Verse 27 says, when she heard about Jesus and all the things that it has been reported that this man has done, he's healed the sick, he's raised the dead. When she heard about Jesus, she thought, this is my only hope. It says she came. I'd like to end the sentence right there. It says she came up behind him and touched his clothes. I'd like to just say this. When she heard about Jesus, she came. You see, this morning, friends, I want to believe for some miracles. Just like this day, we're in a great season right now. Christmas, there's people all around. The crowds are everywhere, and they're bustling about. But many of them have needs, but they don't see Jesus. I want to challenge you this season. In the midst of all the busyness and all the crowds and the hustle and the bustle, I want to encourage you in one aspect or another in your life, you need to reach out and touch Jesus. Right in the middle of all the crowds and the busyness of the season, of all the toys and the wrapping paper and the did I forget this and my lists and all that. Be sure not to miss Jesus. In fact, some of you this morning, I'm going to invite you to come forward for prayer to help you, give you an opportunity to not miss Jesus, because Jesus is here. And I believe that he loves you. And I believe that you've prayed for some things many times before in your life, but tell you what, I'm going to believe that today will be a day that in faith you reached out and you touched his garment. You see, she came in faith. When she heard about Jesus, she said, you know, I've tried everything. I'm going to try this. She came. She came with nothing to lose. In fact, she had a lot to lose, and that's why she was so trembling in fear. She thought to herself, I'm going to be in trouble, and I'm going to have everybody looking at me and laughing at me and mocking me and yelling at me, saying, what in the world did you do that for, you unclean woman? You know better than that. But yet she risked it. She went forward and said, I want to touch him. I just believe that if I touch his garment, and I won't stay long, I just believe if I just touch it, and I'll get out of there. But I love it. Jesus, it doesn't say that he felt healing go out of him. It says he felt power. See, because that's what Jesus is full of. He's full of power. Nothing is impossible for God. Nothing is too difficult. You know, we can go do church service and do stuff. I believe that church isn't really a healthy church until every once in a while we do things that are a little bit out of the ordinary. I can't believe the comments I had from several visitors last week saying, I can't remember the last time I've been to a church where they gave an invitation to receive Christ. 20 people responded. It's like, what a glorious day. 20 first-timers. Several were there to make a public confession. But this morning, this is a great service. It's only 9:40. There's no manipulation. There's no nothing. There's only a little bit of fear on your part. That's all there is right now, because you're not really sure what I'm going to say. Seriously, friends, we're a family. This is church. If we can't come here and meet with God, then we're missing the boat. I happen to be a Pentecostal. I believe that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I believe that he can do miracles. I believe that he can do far more abundantly than all we can ask or think. It requires just faith. And I think faith exercise is the moment you make an action to get up out of your chair to come, saying, I believe. I'll tell you this, nothing magical is going to happen down here when you come, because I'm going to give you an invitation to come. We're not going to spend a lot of time. I mean, at most, I may touch your forehead. I'm not going to push you. I'm not going to blow in your face. Oh, wait a minute. Friends, in all seriousness, with no hype, do you see the empathy of Jesus? And it hasn't changed. Do you know why he kept looking around? Remember he said, who touched me? And the disciples looked at, what in the world are you talking about, who touched you? There's a lot of people touching you. And it says, and he kept looking. And that woman, while she was in panic, because we read it like he kept looking like what? She was going to be in trouble. That's how she heard it. He kept looking. You know why he kept looking? Because he wanted to encourage her. He wanted to say, your faith is rewarded. The world wants to do away with you, but Jesus says, I love you. In the midst of all this, a woman who had been rejected, couldn't be around. He wanted to wrap his loving arms around her and say, you're healed. Go in peace. When he said you are healed, he didn't just mean now, he meant forever. You are healed. I'd like to invite you, and it doesn't have to be just healing, but if you have a need in your life and you think Jesus can take care of it, I want to ask you to come forward. Let's just come up here and symbolically, in our way, by faith, say, Jesus, I just want to touch your garment. If you have a need, would you come? And I'm not going to ask you what your need is. I'm not sure, depending on how many people come, because I assume there's going to be quite a few of us, they're going to want to say, God, I have a need. That I'm not going to ask you, I'm not going to have a time to even pray for all of you individually. Because it's not about me. It's about you coming up to say, Jesus, I just want to touch you. I just want to touch your garment. Jesus, I believe that you are more than able. God, there is nothing